Hello everyone, Jun here. I hope everyone had a blessed weekend. If there's any prayer requests that any one of you would have, please feel free to comment in the comment section down below. Now, I'm going to proceed to my new topic, and this topic is something that I had in mind for some time. Ever since I talked to opposite Christians like 6 years ago. And funnily enough, I see the opposite Christians commentating from my second video. This may be controversial, but opposite Christians of sola scriptura. These people use the very same arguments that I encountered 6 years ago. And for me, opposite Christians will always use these arguments every single time, and they will never stop. Now, um, for me, like the people didn't even watch my video and just use these arguments without even watching my video. But either way, I still think that their arguments should be addressed, and I hope that they realize how weak these arguments really are. Now, I'm not trying to belittle these people. I actually do understand where they're coming from because these arguments uh, at, at first can really be persuasive. I found it very persuasive when I first encountered them. But I do believe that if anybody just think deeper about what these people are saying, they realize that the arguments have major problems. And for the sake of progressing the discussion, these people should just let these arguments go completely. Now, the arguments that opposite Christians would appeal all the time is that Protestants have fallible authority and they cannot justify their church, their doctrine, their sacraments, uh, and other things infallibly. And so, because we don't have infallible authority, we should just dismiss them outright. And at the very same time, these people will say, if scripture is infallible, and since scripture is infallible, then you need an infallible interpreter to interpret uh, the scriptures infallibly. Now, these arguments really seems persuasive on the surface, but there's a lot of problems with it. First things first, when Apostle Christians say that we need an infallible interpreter to interpret the scriptures infallibly, for us Protestants, it logically did it logically necessitate um, someone with infallible authority to determine if this person or this church is actually have the infallible authority to interpret the infallible scripture. And eventually, how do you know if this person can find this infallible interpreter or infallible church infallibly? Then you need another person to see if this person actually has the infallible authority to find this infallible interpreter. And eventually, it will lead to an infinite regress, a never-ending loop where everybody must be infallible to truly know if this person or this church is infallible or not. So it goes nowhere. And at the very same time, when these people are telling Protestants that we don't have infallible authority to justify anything that we believe, let alone the canon, the gospel, or whatever, if they cannot justify their decision to join the apostolic Christian to join an apostolic Christian church infallibly, then why can't we just dismiss their church altogether too? Because how do we actually know if the churches that they joined are actually infallible or not? And logically, if there are many competing churches that are claiming to be the one and true infallible interpreter, then logically it necessitates that there's only going to be one church who is going to be the true interpreter, and everybody else will be false according to their paradigm. For me, I don't believe this. I think no church have infallible authority whatsoever. Either way, if they cannot justify their decision to join whatever church that they chose infallibly, then for me, I think it's fair for Protestants to just dismiss their claims altogether. Like, well, why should we take it seriously if you can't even infallibly justify your decisions? They may say, oh, even if I don't have infallible authority or apostolic succession uh, to to join that apostolic church, my church still have infallible authority and and apostolic succession and laying out the hands. But for me, again, it's like, well, how do you even know that? Did you know it because because you had infallible authority to truly notice this? That the Catholic Church or Oriental or other apostolic churches have infallible authority, apostolic succession, and laying of the hands. Well, if they can't really infallibly justify their decision, again, for me, then they should just drop the necessity of infallible authority. And eventually, if they are still persistent to prove that their decision is infallible, they're going to start to bring scripture. Like Matthew 16, 18, verse 18 to 19, uh, apostolic Christians who are not Catholics would appeal to the Council of Jerusalem for their infallible authority. And the church is the founder, is the foundation of the pillar of truth, and the list goes on and on. But for me, first things first, when they do that, these people, when they are bringing their verses, most of these verses are not really infallibly defined by their church. Now, I'm saying most. I'm not saying all of these verses. Second, the way how they interpret these scriptures, again, how do they know if they are actually infallibly interpreting it? Where is the infallible authority for them to truly interpret these scriptures in such a way? So again, they have to prove infallible authority. If they say that, and at the same time, they are saying that these scriptures are infallible, so you need an infallible interpreter. So why are you interpreting these verses without infallible authority? So they should just show us and prove to us they have infallible authority to do these things. And at the very same time, because they say the scripture requires an infallible interpreter, and many Protestants, when they are reading scripture, keep creating chaos and confusion, and for over 44,000 denominations, they have to prove to us that the verses that they are appealing to has no room for any possible interpretation, because they keep criticizing Protestants of their disunity and chaos because the scripture have many ways to interpret things, because the scripture itself is open to interpretation. This is why you need infallible authority to limit these uh, interpretations and reduce the chaos. So they have to prove that these verses, right, are not open to interpretation whatsoever, and they can't. They really can't do it, because whatever verses that they appeal, I'll show them that you can reasonably interpret these things differently than the way they do. Where I will say Matthew 16 verse 18 to 19 doesn't really mean that the church is infallible. Yeah, God will guide the church, but it doesn't mean that the church would always be infallible, and that such a situation will be immune from error. It doesn't really say that at all. It doesn't even mean gates of Hades. I'll build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevent or will not prevail against it. Does that actually automatically mean that the church is infallible? It doesn't mean that. How can it possibly mean that? The church is the foundation of the pillar of truth. Basil said that Athanasius is the foundation and the pillar of truth. Okay, so what? He's the source of all truth? No. Usually in the history of the church, the foundation, the pillar of truth means that a church or someone is withholding and upholding and defending the truth. That's what it is. That it doesn't mean that they're going to uphold, and protect the truth infallibly. It doesn't mean that. And again, when they are making a specific claim, which is that their church is infallible, and that you need infallible authority to interpret the scripture, then for me, they should give very clear and definite verses for that, because that's a big claim and it's very specific. So to give very general and vague verses, really doesn't is really doesn't prove their case, and actually it weakens their case, because they're saying that they have infallible authority, and they're infallibly trying to prove their case to us. So if they keep demanding infallible authority from us, then I think Protestants fairly can demand these people to infallibly prove their case. And if they can't do that, then you know we'll dismiss all of their claims altogether, and they should just drop it. Every time apostolic Christians argue against one another, they don't keep appealing to infallible authority. They appeal to arguments and evidence, and most of the time, these arguments and evidence are not perfect and are not infallible. They're fallible. But I think that it's important to know the objective value of evidence and arguments, even if they're not perfect, and even if evidence can be open to interpretation. And we should just try to gracefully and reasonably uh, argue for the evidence and arguments, rather than just demanding people to show infallible authority, because that goes nowhere. Again, if people do not understand what I'm trying to say, please ask in the comment section down below. I hope everybody have an amazing day and a blessed life. Um, may God bring all apostle Christians and Protestants together in truth and love. And please pray for me that God guides me whenever I make these videos and outside of my life, outside of my YouTube channel. Thank you so much, everyone. God bless.